James Carter had always been drawn to the unknown. As a human explorer traveling across distant galaxies, he had seen planets with skies of liquid gold, forests that sang in harmony, and oceans that glowed under twin moons. Yet nothing in his experience could prepare him for the invitation that arrived one quiet evening aboard his starship. The invitation came as a holographic scroll, shimmering into existence above his control panel. James leaned closer, squinting at the strange symbols that rotated in midair. Though he had studied hundreds of alien languages, these symbols were unlike anything he had ever seen. A soft, melodic voice accompanied the hologram. "James Carter," it said, "you are cordially invited to the Unity Festival on Zolaris Prime. Your presence is requested as a guest of honor. Attendance is highly esteemed." Humans rarely visited, and those who did were considered exceptional, clever, adaptable, or sometimes simply lucky. James leaned back, considering the offer. "Well," he muttered to himself, "I am all three of those things. I guess it's time to see what Zolaris has to show me." The planet was smaller than Earth but more vibrant, with cities carved into crystalline cliffs that reflected the light of its three suns. As he descended in his small shuttle, James could see thousands of Zolari citizens moving in orderly formations, their luminescent skin glowing softly. The streets sparkled with energy streams that ran like rivers between buildings, and strange, hovering creatures flitted above the crowds. He landed near the city center, where the festival was said to take place. Immediately, he was greeted by a delegation of Zolari elders. They had long, elegant forms, 4 arms, and eyes that shimmered with multiple colors. Though their appearance was startling, their movements were fluid and graceful, and there was a warmth in their manner that put James at ease. "Welcome, chosen guest," one of the elders said in perfect basic English, which James appreciated. "Your arrival honors our people. You have traveled far, and your presence will bring fortune to the festival." "It's an honor to be here." The aroma of exotic foods, spicy, sweet, and slightly metallic, filled the air. Finally, he was led to the main ceremonial hall. It was enormous, with ceilings that seemed to reach the sky, adorned with intricate patterns that shifted like living murals. The center of the hall was dominated by a circular platform, surrounded by hundreds of Zolari women in ceremonial attire. Their garments shimmered and changed color with their movements, and each held an object James did not recognize, delicate rings, glowing bands, and strange bouquets that seemed to float in midair. James froze for a moment, overwhelmed. He had not expected such grandeur, nor the focus on him. The women smiled politely, some bowing slightly, others simply observing. The elders gestured for him to step onto the platform. As he did, a soft hum began to resonate through the hall. The women raised their objects, and the patterns on the walls started to swirl in rhythm with the sound. James watched in awe. Everything was beautiful, mesmerizing, and completely alien. Do I just stand here?" he asked, uncertain. "You are the chosen one elder said. Your role is central. Observe, participate, and honor our tradition." At one point, he was asked to lift a floating crystal and place it in a specific position. Though he had no idea why, he did it carefully, following his instincts. The crystal fit perfectly, and the crowd responded with a low, harmonious cheer. Hours passed, and James continued to follow instructions, always careful not to make a mistake. Despite the strangeness, he began to enjoy the ceremony. He noticed the subtle ways the Zolari communicated, shifts in color, changes in posture, and the rhythm of their voices. It was like learning a new language, one of gestures and energy. His human brain thrived on the challenge, analyzing patterns and predicting outcomes. Every successful move brought a small thrill. During a brief pause, one of the Zolari women approached him. She was tall, with skin that shifted from soft green to gold as she moved. She held a glowing band in her hands. "Place this upon your wrist," she said softly. "It is a symbol of unity." Do all of you wear these?" he asked, trying to sound casual. The woman nodded. "It is tradition. The chosen one bonds with the women of the festival to honor harmony." "Oh, I see," he said carefully, forcing a smile. "I'm honored, I guess." Yet he reminded himself, humans had always succeeded in strange worlds by observing, learning, and thinking quickly. If he stayed calm, he could navigate this situation with dignity. The ceremony continued. Each step was more elaborate than the last, with the women presenting gifts, performing synchronized movements, and chanting in a melodic language James could only partially interpret. Every time he acted correctly, the elders nodded and the women's eyes sparkled in approval. Every minor misstep was gently corrected, and James adapted immediately. Despite the strangeness, a sense of humor began to creep into the situation. James found himself chuckling quietly at some of the alien customs, the way a floating plate of food demanded careful balance, or how a simple bow could take 3 synchronized gestures to complete properly. Laughter, even quiet, seemed to make the Zolari more at ease. They appreciated a human who could respect their culture while maintaining his own perspective. By the time the ceremony reached its midpoint, James was exhausted but exhilarated. He had danced in ways he didn't think possible, held glowing crystals with precision, and even coordinated a complex sequence of gestures with 6 different women at once. His mind was sharp, and his body surprisingly agile. He realized humans could indeed thrive in the most bizarre of alien systems when they applied observation, logic, and a touch of creativity. As the final part of the first phase began, the elder approached him once more. "Soon you will fully understand your role," the elder said. "But for now, continue with honor. Your presence strengthens the bonds of our people." As the Zolari women surrounded him once more, offering gifts and guiding his movements, James felt a strange sense of pride. He was far from home, in a culture completely alien to his own, yet he was participating fully, learning quickly, and even impressing his hosts. This was human ingenuity in action, observing, adapting, and finding a way to shine even in the strangest circumstances. The first day of the Unity Festival ended with the platform bathed in soft golden light, the hum of energy fading slowly. The women stepped back, and the elders nodded in satisfaction. James stood at the center, tired but triumphant, realizing that he had survived the first and most confusing part of the ceremony. He took a deep breath, feeling a mix of relief and anticipation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new rituals, and perhaps a clearer understanding of what it truly meant to be the chosen one. But James was ready. If humans could survive the endless void of space, surely they could navigate the customs of an alien wedding, no matter how strange. As he stepped away from the platform, he couldn't help but laugh softly to himself. Humans always seem to find themselves in the most impossible situations, and yet somehow they always manage to come out on top. James looked up at the crystalline sky of Zolaris Prime, the 3 suns casting long shadows across the city, and thought, well, this is going to be one interesting wedding. The next morning, James awoke to the soft glow of Zolaris Prime's twin suns and the faint hum of the city outside his temporary quarters. He rubbed his eyes and sat up, recalling the dizzying events of the previous day. The Unity Festival was in full swing, and though he had survived the first phase without major blunders, he could already feel that the challenges ahead would be more complicated. As he stepped out into the crystalline corridors of the guest pavilion, he noticed the Zolari women waiting outside his room. They moved gracefully, their luminescent skin shifting in soft waves of color. Each carried a small item, gifts or ritual implements. James was not yet sure which they placed carefully in his path. "Good morning, chosen one," one of them said, her voice melodic and warm. "Today, the ceremony continues. Your presence is requested on the central platform." He thought little of it at first, attributing it to the excitement of the festival. Yet, a small voice in the back of his mind whispered that perhaps his role was not as simple as he had assumed. The ceremonial hall looked even grander than the day before. The patterns on the walls seemed to pulse in time with the soft hum that filled the room. On the platform, dozens of women waited, each holding a glowing object, bands, rings, or floating flowers. Their eyes shone as they turned toward him. James stepped forward, careful to mirror the movements he had learned yesterday. The women guided him through a series of gestures, each more intricate than the last. He followed them perfectly, his human brain picking up patterns quickly. Every correct motion earned a nod from the elders, and he felt a small thrill of pride. Midway through the ceremony, a tall woman with shimmering teal skin approached him. She held a delicate, glowing band in her hands and gestured for him to place it on his other wrist. "This band," she said, "symbolizes the connection that binds you to us." He had noticed the bands yesterday, but now the meaning was becoming clearer. "Connection to you all?" he asked cautiously. The woman smiled. "To all the women of the festival, your bond strengthens the unity of our people." Somehow, by Zolari tradition, he was being bound to every woman participating in the festival. The thought made his head spin, yet even in the midst of confusion, James' human instincts kicked in. Panic would get him nowhere. The Zolari respected intelligence, cleverness, and calm thinking. If he wanted to survive this ordeal with dignity, and perhaps even make allies, he needed to approach it as a challenge, not a disaster. He slipped the band onto his wrist with as much grace as he could muster, keeping his expression neutral. The woman's eyes sparkled, and she gave a small nod of approval before stepping back. James breathed deeply. One step at a time, he reminded himself. The next phase of the ceremony began. The women approached him in pairs, performing synchronized gestures that required him to mirror their movements precisely. Some held floating objects that shifted in shape, while others presented ribbons that he had to intertwine without tangling. It was a complex ballet of coordination, timing, and observation. James' mind worked furiously. He analyzed each movement, predicting the sequence before it happened. His human ingenuity allowed him to anticipate mistakes, adjust his actions in real time, and even subtly improve the flow of the ritual. The elders watched closely, clearly impressed by his skill. By mid-morning, a small crowd of festival spectators had gathered around the platform. James noticed that the women were speaking among themselves in rapid melodic phrases. Though he did not understand the words, the tone carried admiration and amusement. He realized that he was not only surviving the ceremony but excelling at it. The next trial was more challenging. The women each held a glowing crystal, which James had to arrange into a specific pattern on the platform. The crystals hovered in midair, moving slightly as if they had a mind of their own. He carefully studied their positions, adjusted his hands, and finally placed each one in perfect alignment. A ripple of approval passed through the crowd. The elders' multiple eyes glimmered in delight, and the women smiled broadly. James allowed himself a small, triumphant grin. He was learning to thrive in alien systems by observing, analyzing, and adapting, the very qualities that humans had relied on for millennia. As the afternoon wore on, James began to notice more subtle hints about the true nature of his role. The women occasionally touched his arms or hands, placing their bands carefully and exchanging small nods with the elders. Their gestures were formal, yet intimate in a way he had not anticipated. He realized that by Zolaris standards, he was considered the central figure in this bonding ceremony, the groom, so to speak. Instead of panic, James felt a spark of amusement. Humans often found themselves in strange and unpredictable situations. This was just another example, albeit one more bewildering than most. If he could navigate this with cleverness, humor, and respect, he could turn what might have been a crisis into a triumph. He began to interact more actively with the women, using his human creativity to contribute to the ceremony. When one of the floating objects drifted out of alignment, he caught it and adjusted it with a flourish, earning appreciative nods. When a complex sequence of hand movements threatened to confuse him, he quickly developed a rhythm that allowed all participants to move in harmony. By late afternoon, James had become more comfortable. He no longer felt like a passive participant. He was actively shaping the ritual. The women responded to his cues, and even the elders seemed pleased with his ingenuity. It was clear that humans could indeed hold their own in alien traditions, provided they observed carefully and acted with intelligence. During a brief pause, one of the women approached him quietly. She held a small, floating mirror-like device and gestured for him to look into it. "What is this for?" James asked. "It shows your reflection as we see it," she explained. "Your actions, your cleverness, and your respect strengthen the bonds you share with us. It is a reminder that you are central to the Unity Festival." He realized that humans could thrive anywhere, even when the rules were entirely foreign. The key was observation, adaptability, and a willingness to engage fully. The final phase of the day's ceremony began as the sun dipped lower in the sky. The women formed a circle around him, each holding a glowing ribbon that stretched toward the center of the platform. James took hold of one end and soon found himself entwined in a complex network of ribbons. The elders began a rhythmic chant, and the patterns on the walls shifted in response to the energy of the ritual. James focused, carefully mirroring the movements of the women, adjusting the ribbons, and maintaining the harmony of the ritual. It was challenging, exhausting, and exhilarating all at once. Yet he noticed something remarkable. The Zolaris were trusting him completely. They had placed him at the center of their ceremony, yet they allowed him freedom to make small decisions, to show creativity, and to act independently. It was a recognition of human intelligence and capability. As the chant reached its crescendo, the ribbons glowed brighter, and a gentle hum resonated through the hall. James felt a strange warmth spread through him. The women's eyes were filled with admiration, the elders' faces glowed with satisfaction, and the crowd of spectators erupted into soft, harmonious cheers. James realized that he had not only survived the day, but had become an integral part of the Unity Festival. He had navigated the complexities of an alien tradition, impressed a group of beings far more advanced in many ways, and maintained his own dignity throughout. By the time the ceremony concluded, he was physically tired but mentally exhilarated. The elders approached him once more. "You have honored our people, chosen one said. "Your cleverness, courage, and adaptability have strengthened the bonds of our community. Tomorrow, your role will deepen, and your actions will shape the next phase of the festival." As he returned to his quarters, he reflected on the day's events. He had learned about Zolari culture, participated in complex rituals, and begun to understand his role in the Unity Festival. More importantly, he had realized that human ingenuity, humor, and courage could thrive even in the most alien circumstances. That night, as the three suns set behind the crystalline city, James lay on his bed and smiled. He was the chosen one, the center of an alien wedding he had not expected to attend, and yet he felt strangely at home. The next day promised more challenges, more rituals, and perhaps more revelations about his role. But one thing was certain: humans were capable of rising to any occasion, no matter how strange or bewildering. And James Carter intended to prove it. He drifted off to sleep, ready to face whatever Zolaris Prime had in store for him next. The sun rose again over Zolaris Prime, casting soft beams of light across the crystalline city. James Carter stretched as he stepped out of his quarters, feeling the strange mixture of excitement and nervousness that had been building since his arrival. Yesterday's rituals had been challenging, yet he had managed to navigate them with a mix of observation, humor, and adaptability. Today, he sensed, would be even more complex. As he walked through the hallways, he noticed that the women of the festival were moving with a quiet energy that seemed directed toward him. Their laughter was melodic, and their eyes shimmered with curiosity and expectation. It was becoming increasingly clear that the entire Unity Festival revolved around his actions, decisions, and reactions. Every gesture, every small movement seemed to carry weight he had not anticipated. "Good morning, chosen one," said one of the women, holding a delicate ribbon that glowed faintly. "Today, your role deepens. The elders await your presence on the central platform." He had begun to understand that his role was not passive. The Zolari were not merely performing rituals for him. They expected participation, cleverness, and initiative. When he arrived at the ceremonial hall, the scale of the gathering took his breath away. Hundreds of Zolari women were present, all holding shimmering objects that hovered above their hands. The energy in the room was palpable, a mixture of anticipation, curiosity, and celebration. The walls shifted in color and pattern, reacting to the collective mood of the crowd. James stepped onto the central platform, noting how all eyes were on him. For the first time, he felt the true weight of his position. The elders' multiple eyes studied him closely, and the women watched his every movement, expecting precision and creativity. It was, he realized, a test of intellect, adaptability, and composure. The ceremony began with a complex sequence of movements. The women approached in groups, guiding James through gestures, dances, and the placement of floating objects. Unlike the previous day, there was less instruction. He had to anticipate patterns, adjust to unexpected changes, and make small decisions that affected the flow of the ritual. One particular trial involved floating crystal spheres that reacted to thought and touch. James had to arrange them into a precise pattern while simultaneously following the movements of three women who performed a synchronized dance around him. The crystals shifted unpredictably, requiring him to adjust quickly. His human mind analyzed the rhythm, the positions, and the likely movements, allowing him to anticipate and correct errors before they became noticeable. By the end of the trial, the spheres were perfectly aligned, and the women nodded in approval. A wave of soft hums passed through the hall, signaling their satisfaction. James allowed himself a small smile. Humans, he thought, were clever indeed, especially when they relied on observation and logic in unfamiliar systems. As the ceremony progressed, the hints about the true nature of his role became impossible to ignore. Each woman approached him individually, placing bands on his wrists, adjusting ribbons around his arms, and performing gestures that, in retrospect, were deeply personal and symbolic. The bands glowed briefly upon contact, sending warmth across his skin. It was clear that he was, in the Zolaris sense, the central figure in a union that involved every participating woman. James paused, taking a moment to process this revelation. The situation was strange, unprecedented, and utterly bewildering, but panic would accomplish nothing. He had learned that the Zolari valued intelligence, creativity, and calm decision-making. If he could respond with cleverness, humility, and good humor, he could navigate this bizarre custom successfully. He began to experiment subtly, testing how much autonomy he had. When a ribbon threatened to tangle, he gently redirected it without breaking the flow of the ceremony. When a floating crystal moved unexpectedly, he caught it with precision and placed it in the correct position. Each successful adjustment brought nods of approval, smiles from the women, and glimmers of admiration from the elders. By mid-morning, the patterns in the hall had become increasingly complex. The ribbons, bands, and floating objects intertwined in a delicate network, responding to movements and energy flows. James realized that he was no longer merely participating, he was shaping the ritual. His choices influenced the flow, balance, and harmony of the entire ceremony. Amidst this complexity, James began to notice subtle social cues. The women exchanged glances, whispers, and small gestures among themselves, always directed toward him. Their expressions were not just formal, they carried curiosity, respect, and even amusement. James realized that in their culture, he was being evaluated not only for skill but also for personality. Cleverness, courage, and adaptability were prized, but so was the ability to respond with humor and grace. He decided to lean into this aspect, using his human instincts to engage with the ritual playfully. When a floating object drifted slightly off course, he exaggerated his movements in mock panic before correcting it perfectly. The women laughed, soft, melodic, and approvingly, and the elders nodded. Even in a situation that could have been overwhelming, James discovered that humor and creativity were as powerful as precision and logic. By afternoon, the full scale of the festival's purpose became clear. The ritual was not simply a ceremony. It was a test of human adaptability and cultural intelligence. The elders had placed him at the center of a bonding process that involved dozens of participants, relying on his ability to observe, anticipate, and interact successfully. It was a recognition of human ingenuity, a subtle way of showing that even in a world so alien, humans could shine. James felt a surge of pride. Despite the strangeness, he had managed to thrive. He had navigated complex movements, coordinated multiple participants, and maintained the harmony of the ritual. He had also begun to understand the social dynamics at play, realizing that humans were capable not only of surviving alien systems, but of excelling within them. During a brief pause in the ceremony, one of the women approached him with a small, floating mirror-like device. She gestured for him to look into it. "This shows how we see you," she explained. "Your actions, cleverness, and respect strengthen the bonds of our people. It reminds all participants that you are central to the Unity Festival." He realized that, in a way, humans were being tested by the Zolari, evaluated for qualities that went beyond physical skill or ritual knowledge. Observation, quick thinking, and ingenuity mattered more than raw strength or tradition. The final trial of the day was the most elaborate yet. The women formed a vast circle around the central platform, each holding glowing ribbons that extended toward the center. James took hold of one and soon found himself entangled in a web of shimmering light. The elders began a rhythmic chant, and the hall seemed to respond, patterns on the walls swirling and shifting in harmony with the sound. James concentrated, following the movements of the women while adjusting the ribbons to maintain balance. It was physically demanding and mentally exhausting, yet he approached it as he had everything else, with careful observation, adaptability, and a sense of play. When a ribbon tangled unexpectedly, he corrected it with a small flourish, earning a ripple of laughter and applause. By the time the chant reached its peak, the network of ribbons glowed brightly, forming a breathtaking pattern that reflected both harmony and complexity. James felt a deep warmth spread through him. He had not only survived this phase of the Unity Festival, he had mastered it in a way that impressed both women and elders. As the ritual concluded, the women stepped back, their expressions filled with admiration. The elders approached, their multicolored eyes shining with approval. "You have honored our people, chosen one elder said. "Your cleverness, courage, and adaptability have strengthened the bonds of our community. Tomorrow, your role will deepen, and your actions will influence the next stage of the festival." Here, in an alien culture so far removed from his own, his ingenuity, humor, and ability to observe and adapt had allowed him to thrive. As he returned to his quarters, James reflected on the day. He realized that his position at the center of the festival was both a privilege and a challenge. He was the chosen one, the focal point of a ceremony unlike anything humans had encountered. And yet, through clever thinking and calm confidence, he had earned the respect of the Zolari and their people. That evening, as the twin suns set and the crystalline city shimmered in fading light, James lay on his bed and smiled. He had survived one more day of the Unity Festival, navigated complex social dynamics, and proven that humans could excel even in the most alien circumstances. Tomorrow would bring new trials, more rituals, and perhaps further revelations about his role in the festival. But one truth was clear. Humans had the ability to shine in any environment, no matter how strange or unpredictable. And James Carter intended to continue proving it. He drifted into sleep, ready to face whatever Zolaris Prime had in store next, confident that wit, adaptability, and a touch of humor could overcome even the most bewildering of challenges. James Carter woke to the soft hum of Zolaris Prime's city once again. The twin suns had already risen, casting long, glowing beams across the crystalline buildings. He stretched and rubbed his eyes, thinking of the previous days. The Unity Festival had pushed him far beyond anything he had expected. The rituals were more intricate, the movements more precise, and the social expectations increasingly clear. Yet James felt ready. Humans were made for challenges, and he had already learned that observation, cleverness, and humor could guide him through even the most bewildering situations. As he stepped into the hallways, he noticed the women of the festival waiting for him. Today, their energy seemed higher, their eyes brighter. The rhythm of the city seemed to pulse in harmony with the festival itself. Every step he took was accompanied by a subtle shift in the glow of the walls, as if the entire city were aware of his presence. "Good morning, chosen one," a woman said, her voice melodic. "Today, the festival will reach new heights. The elders have prepared trials that will test not only your skill but also your wisdom and creativity. Lead the way." A sense of anticipation filled the air, and the energy of the room felt almost tangible. James stepped onto the central platform, the eyes of hundreds of Zolari fixed on him. He felt the familiar mix of excitement and pressure. The elders' multiple eyes studied him intently, while the women moved with fluid grace, guiding him toward the first trial of the day. This trial involved a complex arrangement of floating crystals, ribbons, and energy bands. James was instructed to weave the objects into a pattern that symbolized harmony and connection. Unlike previous trials, there was minimal guidance. He had to anticipate movements, coordinate with multiple participants, and adapt to shifting conditions in real time. James' mind worked quickly. He observed the positions of the ribbons, the movements of the women, and the flow of energy from the crystals. Using a combination of logic and intuition, he adjusted his actions, predicting the behavior of the objects before they moved. Each correct adjustment earned approving nods and soft, melodic hums from the women. As the trial progressed, James noticed the subtle social dynamics at play. The women were not simply performing ritual movements. They were testing his intelligence, patience, and creativity. They watched for his reactions, noting how he handled unexpected challenges. It was a subtle game of observation, and James realized that the Zolari valued humans who could respond with cleverness and composure under pressure. Midway through the trial, a problem arose. One of the floating ribbons drifted too close to a crystal, threatening to disrupt the pattern. Without hesitation, James reached out, catching the ribbon and redirecting it with precise timing. The crystal and ribbon aligned perfectly, and the room responded with a harmonious glow that spread across the walls. The women smiled, and the elders' eyes glimmered with approval. Encouraged, James began to take more initiative. He suggested minor adjustments to the flow of the ribbons and crystals, creating patterns that were both aesthetically pleasing and stable. The Zolari women responded positively, following his lead and allowing him more freedom within the ritual. He realized that humans could not only survive alien traditions, but also improve them through ingenuity. After completing the trial, the elders approached him with small floating devices that displayed holographic images of complex geometric patterns. James was instructed to replicate these patterns using the glowing objects in the hall. The patterns were intricate, constantly shifting in subtle ways, requiring precise timing and coordination with the women. James focused, using his analytical skills to break down the patterns into manageable sequences. He directed the women gently, demonstrating subtle cues to maintain alignment and balance. The ribbons intertwined seamlessly, the crystals hovered in perfect formation, and the energy bands glowed brighter as harmony was achieved. By the afternoon, James had completed several trials, each more challenging than the last. His confidence grew, yet he remained humble. He understood that the Zolari valued respect as much as skill. Every action was observed, every decision noted. His ability to maintain composure, adapt quickly, and act with creativity was earning him respect and admiration from the entire community. During a brief pause, one of the women approached him with a delicate floating object resembling a small globe of light. "This is a symbol of insight," she explained. "Place it within the pattern. Your understanding will guide its energy." The women and elders nodded in approval, and James felt a deep sense of accomplishment. The next challenge was even more demanding. The women formed a complex formation, moving in synchronized patterns while holding multiple glowing objects. James had to anticipate their movements, adjust his own position, and ensure that every element of the ritual remained in perfect harmony. One misstep could disrupt the balance, but James remained calm, analyzing patterns and predicting sequences with precision. As he moved through the challenge, he noticed small details that others might miss: the slight variations in the women's gestures, the subtle changes in the glow of the crystals, and the rhythmic shifts in the room's energy. By paying attention to these cues, he was able to make adjustments before problems arose, maintaining the flow and harmony of the ritual. The trial ended successfully, and the elders approached him once more. "Your actions today have honored our people," one said. "You demonstrate not only skill but also wisdom, creativity, and respect. Tomorrow, your role will expand further, and the festival will reach its climax." By observing, analyzing, and responding thoughtfully, he had not only survived but excelled in a society far more complex than his own. As the sun began to set, James reflected on the day's events. He had faced challenges that tested his mind, body, and social skills. He had learned the subtle cues of Zolari culture, earned the respect of the women and elders, and proved that humans could thrive even in the most alien circumstances. That evening, he walked through the glowing streets of the city, taking in the beauty of Zolaris Prime. The crystalline buildings reflected the light of the twin suns and the energy of the festival, creating a kaleidoscope of color and movement. James felt a deep sense of connection to the place, not just as a visitor, but as an active participant in a living tradition. He returned to his quarters, exhausted but exhilarated. The trials had pushed him to his limits, yet he had discovered a strength within himself that he had not fully appreciated. Humans were capable of adapting, learning, and excelling in any environment. Zolaris Prime was just another example. As he lay down to rest, James thought about the next day. The climax of the Unity Festival promised to be the most challenging yet. He would need all his skill, intelligence, and adaptability to succeed, but he felt ready. Humans had always faced the unknown and emerged stronger. He was confident that, with careful observation, clever thinking, and a touch of humor, he could navigate whatever the Zolari had planned. James closed his eyes, allowing himself a moment of quiet reflection. The Unity Festival had taught him that humans could shine not only through physical skill, but through intelligence, creativity, and respect for others. He had become an integral part of an alien tradition, proving that even in the most unfamiliar circumstances, humans could thrive. As he drifted off to sleep, James felt a sense of anticipation. Tomorrow would bring the final challenges of the festival, the culmination of all he had learned. And he was ready to face them, confident in the knowledge that human ingenuity, courage, and adaptability could overcome even the most bewildering trials. The sun rose high over Zolaris Prime, casting its golden light across the crystalline city. James Carter felt a mixture of anticipation and determination as he prepared for the final day of the Unity Festival. The previous days had tested his intellect, agility, and composure. He had learned to read alien gestures, interpret subtle cues, and respond with ingenuity and humor. Today, he understood, would be the culmination of all his efforts, a test of every skill he had honed since his arrival. When he stepped out of his quarters, the city seemed alive in celebration. The women of the festival moved gracefully, their luminescent skin shimmering in intricate patterns. Their eyes held a soft admiration, and the floating objects they carried glowed brighter than ever. It was clear that the entire community was aware of the significance of today's rituals. James felt a thrill of responsibility. Humans had always faced challenges with courage and creativity, and today he would demonstrate that once more. "Good morning, chosen one," said a woman approaching him, holding a ribbon that pulsed gently with light. "Today, the festival reaches its climax. The elders await your actions. Your choices will shape the final outcome." Hundreds of Zolari women stood in precise formations, each holding glowing bands, ribbons, or floating spheres. The energy in the room was almost tangible, a mixture of anticipation, excitement, and expectation. When he stepped onto the central platform, James felt the weight of the moment. The elders watched intently, their multiple eyes glimmering with focus. Every movement he made, every decision he took would be observed. He realized that the final day was not simply about completing rituals. It was a test of leadership, problem-solving, and adaptability. The first challenge involved a complex pattern of floating crystals and energy ribbons. The women moved in intricate synchrony, weaving the objects into designs that represented harmony, balance, and unity. James had to anticipate their movements, coordinate with multiple participants, and maintain the rhythm of the ritual while managing the delicate objects. Using everything he had learned over the past days, James carefully guided the crystals and ribbons, adjusting them in real time to maintain perfect alignment. When a ribbon threatened to tangle, he redirected it smoothly. When a crystal drifted off course, he adjusted it with precision. The women responded to his cues, their movements harmonizing with his actions. The elders nodded in approval, and the crowd of spectators emitted a soft, harmonious hum that echoed through the hall. As the ritual progressed, the true scope of the Unity Festival became clear. James was not merely a participant. He was the central figure connecting every element of the ceremony. Each decision he made influenced the flow of energy, the movement of objects, and the harmony of the participants. He realized that the festival was designed to honor intelligence, creativity, and adaptability, qualities humans excelled at naturally. Midway through the morning, a group of women approached him with floating devices resembling small globes of light. "These represent insight," one said. "Place them within the pattern. Your understanding will guide their energy." As he did so, the hall brightened, the ribbons glowed, and the crystals aligned perfectly. A harmonious tone filled the room, and the women's eyes shone with admiration. The next challenge was even more demanding. The women formed a massive formation around the platform, each holding multiple glowing objects. James had to anticipate their movements, maintain his own balance, and ensure the integrity of the ritual. One misstep could disrupt the entire flow, but he remained calm, analyzing patterns, predicting sequences, and responding with agility. Through careful observation and creative problem-solving, he guided the participants seamlessly. When a ribbon threatened to collide with a floating crystal, he devised a subtle adjustment, redirecting the energy without disturbing the rhythm. The women responded immediately, adjusting their own movements in harmony with his. By the end of the trial, the pattern was flawless, a beautiful display of light, energy, and coordination. The elders approached him, their expressions glowing with approval. "Your actions today honor our people, chosen one," one said. "You have demonstrated not only skill but also wisdom, adaptability, and leadership. The final stage awaits. You must now guide the entire festival to its conclusion." It was not just about precise movements or clever solutions. It required vision, coordination, and the ability to inspire others. He realized that this was the ultimate test of human ingenuity and composure. The women arranged themselves in a vast circle around the platform, each holding glowing ribbons that extended toward the center. James stepped forward, taking hold of one of the ribbons. The elders began a rhythmic chant, and the entire hall seemed to pulse in response. The patterns on the walls shifted, reflecting the energy of the ceremony. James focused on the task at hand. He guided the ribbons, coordinating movements with the women, adjusting positions, and maintaining balance. He noticed small variations, the subtle changes in the women's gestures, the shifts in the glow of the objects, and the rhythm of the elders' chant. By paying attention to these details, he ensured that the pattern remained harmonious. As the ritual reached its climax, James realized that the entire festival was not just a series of challenges. It was a celebration of connection, unity, and intelligence. His role was central, but it was also collaborative. Humans could thrive anywhere, he thought, not by dominating or overpowering, but by observing, adapting, and working in harmony with others. The final sequence involved releasing the energy of the ritual into the city. James guided the floating globes, ribbons, and crystals into a precise formation that channeled light and energy throughout the hall. The women followed his lead perfectly, their movements synchronized and fluid. As the final objects settled into place, the hall erupted in a harmonious glow. The walls shimmered, the floating objects pulsed with light, and the energy of the city itself seemed to vibrate in celebration. A wave of applause and melodic cheers filled the hall. The women smiled, their eyes bright with admiration. The elders approached James, their expressions full of respect and pride. "You have completed the Unity Festival with honor," one elder said. "Your cleverness, adaptability, and leadership have strengthened the bonds of our people. You have proven that humans are capable of thriving in our society, even in the most complex and unfamiliar circumstances." He had learned the subtle cues of Zolari culture, earned the respect of the women and elders, and demonstrated that humans could excel in any environment. One of the women approached him with a small, floating mirror. "This reflects how we see you," she said. James looked into the mirror and saw his reflection, not just as a human, but as a figure of importance and respect within this alien society. His expression was calm and confident, and his posture reflected the ingenuity and courage that had carried him through the festival. As the celebration continued, James realized that the Unity Festival had taught him a powerful lesson. Humans could succeed anywhere through observation, creativity, and collaboration. His actions had brought harmony, impressed the Zolari, and strengthened connections across a culture vastly different from his own. The festival concluded with a grand celebration. Humans and Zolari shared laughter, knowledge, and music. James found himself at the center of the gathering, honored not as a conqueror or a guest, but as a respected participant and contributor. He felt a deep sense of pride, not only for surviving the festival, but for demonstrating the qualities that made humans remarkable. As night fell and the crystalline city shimmered under the light of the twin suns and the distant stars, James reflected on his journey. The Unity Festival had been strange, challenging, and exhilarating. He had faced the unknown, navigated complex rituals, and earned the respect of an alien society. Humans had proven once again that adaptability, intelligence, and creativity were qualities that could shine anywhere. James looked up at the night sky, feeling a sense of connection to the universe. He had entered the Unity Festival as a curious explorer and emerged as a symbol of human capability. He knew that the lessons he had learned here, observation, adaptability, patience, and clever problem-solving, would guide him in all future adventures. As he returned to his quarters, he smiled, knowing that humans could thrive in even the most unfamiliar and complex environments. The Unity Festival had tested him, challenged him, and ultimately celebrated him, not just as an individual but as a representative of his species. James lay down, exhausted but exhilarated. He thought about the friendships he had made, the respect he had earned, and the challenges he had overcome. The festival had been an extraordinary experience, and he knew that humans could take pride in their ability to navigate the unknown with intelligence, courage, and creativity. As he drifted off to sleep, he felt a sense of anticipation for the adventures yet to come. Zolaris Prime had shown him that humans could shine anywhere in the galaxy, even in the most bewildering and alien circumstances. And James Carter, the chosen one of the Unity Festival, was ready for whatever challenges awaited him next.